All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. I am very excited today. Today's guest, I'm serious, maybe the longest standing tech founder on the planet. This man has been a pillar of the tech industry. He's profiled in Forbes, has a series on the New York Times. He and his company have survived the dot-com crash, financial crisis, and have now emerged as one of the most important tech companies in the world today, helping to make life and communication easier through AI. So everyone, please welcome me in joining CEO, reformer, philanthropist, and inventor of web chat, Rob LoCascio. Rob, how are you, man?
Great. How you doing, Jake?
I'm excited for this conversation. I mean,
same here.
You've been through it all. So, like everyone knows, in these short shows, we call it our top 3 or our top 4 moments that shaped us. So we're going to spend 20 minutes here over really going through. I could do like 8 episodes with you just because of like how much you've seen, and I'm sure our audience would love it too. But we always start at the beginning, and so you grew up in New York in the 70s. Early 80s. So tell me, what was it like growing up for you in Babylon during those years?
I mean, Babylon's a really small town on Long Island, about an hour and a half or an hour, a little over an hour from New York City, but it might have been 10 hours from New York City. New York City was always like this big place, and it was a pretty small town. And I guess for me, I felt it was too small for what I wanted to do in life. And when I got my first opportunity to get out of there, I got out of there. But it was an idyllic life. I mean, I grew up in a middle-class family. On Long Island, my dad was an entrepreneur. And but to give you an idea, this gives you an idea how silly this place was. Like, my dad would be up and down. Like, one day, my dad would have money because the company would do it well. Next day, we lose everything. So, like, we had a Jaguar one year and then a Pinto the next year. I mean, it went from that extreme. And when my dad had a Jaguar, because I'm Italian-American, Sicilian, people in my little public school their parents thought my dad must be in the mafia. That gives you an idea of what we were doing. Because how could this is how talk about discriminatory back then. And then he had a Pinto. So then they thought, I guess he wasn't in the mafia. So
he did something wrong.
He did something wrong. They gave him a Pinto. It's a company car. So,
well, I mean, coming with it from a family of entrepreneurs, again, like, what are some of the things that you remember with your dad, or those conversations early with you around that? Because I can imagine as you're a kid growing up, that can be tough to kind of process.
Yeah, it was. You really don't understand what's going on. I mean, there was just so many ups and downs, and we lived to learn. It's funny, I just lived with it, and the stress of our family. I saw the stress, and there's a lot of financial stress that I didn't realize. Like, now as an adult, I see it playing out. When I was a child, I took saxophone lessons. I remember my parents were fighting over me taking saxophone lessons because we couldn't afford it. So I think my mom was trying to protect us and give us like this cushion. And my dad was a traditional entrepreneur, like rolling the dice on company after company. And he loved the thrill of it. And but it taught me a lot. I lived a very insecure life as a child, and I was able to process it and get through the days. And that enabled me, when I became an entrepreneur, to understand that life is just not a straight line. And I could handle that. So I think for me, I got like boot camp that allows me to deal with a lot more uncertainty than normal people have to deal with.
Was there a moment, and maybe before we kind of get into post college, or was there some of these moments or learnings that you have where you feel like that was solidified, maybe in high school, or then you end up going to Loyola in Maryland? What are some memories that you have from there around that lesson about being comfortable with uncertainty?
I in college, I did a study abroad in Germany. I didn't speak a lick of German, and this is '86. No, it was excuse me, it was '88, and the wall was still up. Communism was raging, and I remember I basically uh, grabbed a train during one of my breaks, and then went to Czechoslovakia, Hungary, went to Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and I put myself in these places, and I didn't, just alone. No cell phone back then. There was no money, access to money. You like brought money in, and you just lived
Cash.
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 And, you, and in the Eastern Bloc, you black market it because they would take your dollars and give you local currency at a high rate. So I could spend like a week in Prague. But it taught me a lot of lessons. One is it taught me a lot about, I learned a lot with traveling about culture, about being open to things. And I also realized unless you see it, you shouldn't believe it. And what I saw back then was we were told that communists wanted to kill us, and they hated us, and we would need to fight them. And we had the whole thing about nuclear war happening. And when I made it over to Czechoslovakia, to Prague, they like everyone loved me. It was like, oh my God, you're an American. Oh, we love America. It was like, oh, do you know my cousin who lives in New Jersey? I mean, literally, I remember this conversation. I'm like, it's not that close. There's a lot of us. But I realized, and I wrote a letter to my Congressman Downey, and I said, I've realized that you've been lying to us. These people wouldn't kill us. They would never take arms with us. They like us, and you've been brainwashing us. So it made me realize, like, I talk about the truth, especially in media, but that's a different topic. I always want to see it for myself. And if you're running a company, people have their filters on what truth is. And I've always felt like anytime there was an issue or something, I'll get on the field of play deeply in that area, because until you can feel it and see it, you should assume that it's not the truth that you may believe, that you may understand as truth.
Did he respond? Did he respond to you?
No, never responded to me. No,
I was hoping there'd be some like epic.
No, there's no epic response
for it. No, I mean, that's pretty an amazing, opportunity. Like, what do you feel like? I mean, I think for a lot of people that age, I mean, you're in their like early 20s here, like that would have been terrifying. Like, what do you think gave you the courage? I mean, yeah, courage is the right word, or curiosity to go and do that, to go to not just one, but so many of those places. Like, where do you feel like that comes from?
I think it comes through the nature of being an entrepreneur is to be curious. And I think in life, curiosity is the greatest gift that we have as human beings. And I was just so curious, like, I listened to U2 back in the 80s. I saw them on Long Island in a small club off the war tour. I mean, it was a club with 1,000 people in it. And, so they were always talking about Northern Ireland and the issues, and I read a lot about it. And I went up there, and this is in the middle. I mean, this is really dangerous. And I was walking through the Protestant areas, the Catholic areas, and there was all these graffiti with like people holding guns, and I got to know local students there, and they took me under their wing, and I learned so much about like Northern Ireland versus what I heard. And so I guess curiosity always trumped fear in my life. Like I always had a sense like if you're curious, you'll be safe, and I always had a good intention. And but I think as any entrepreneur goes or anything, I think in life, you have to be curious to go outside what you're thinking. Once again, experience different things that even are very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it also helps, I think, when you're young too, when you quite don't know what the fear is to an extent, right? You're like your curiosity will take you, and like you said, you'll tend to figure it out eventually. So then you graduate college. And the good part about what I love about going through your bio is, you have it's almost like a less than 1 year stint as an employee. So you have kind of this entrepreneurial, curious spirit. But you went to work in an industrial chemicals trading group and really quickly kind of realized and vowed to never work for anyone but yourself again. So tell me about that experience. And I know that we're going back quite a few years now, but is there something that you remember very specifically from that time that just made that trigger so quickly? Because you just finished college, and I think that's whenever people, that's when they start to get into the machine, as opposed to start to realize really quickly to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I graduated in 90, and in 1991 there's a recession going on. So it was very interesting. Like halfway through the year, things were going great. Then a recession hits at graduation, And I remember like a lot of us couldn't find jobs. I was fortunate if I found a job at this Japanese trading company called a Tochu, not a, excuse me, Elders IXL.
Elders, yeah.
Elders, yeah. And Tochu is another one we worked with. And they basically, we were trading chemicals out of Japan for clear coats on cars. And I was the youngest employee. I just come in. It was a small office in Maryland. And about 6 months into the job or so, I remember I used to man the fax machine. So the faxes would come in and I would
just sit there and wait for that.
Literally. And then I put them in people's offices. That was my job, part of my job, get the faxes. And so fax came in about, hey, you need to terminate this employee. Like we're downsizing. It was like a letter from corporate, and they were in Australia corporate, but we were part of them. And then we were dealing with the Japanese division in Maryland. And they wrote, due to problems of the company, you have to downsize and you need to let go of an employee. Here's the employee you could let go of, like me, because I was the last.
And it was you.
My name on the fax. And I literally handed it to my boss, who was the head of this the little office, and he's like, imagine I handed my like and he looks at me and like, oh shit, like he goes, let me check this out. I don't know what this is. I have no idea. This is from corporate, So he calls corporate. Now I got to sweat it for a whole like day because they're asleep. I come in the next morning. He's like, well, I got to let you go. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So they took me to lunch. They really liked me, and they took me to lunch. The whole group, is about 10 people in the office. And I remember a guy asked me, what did you learn from this experience? And I said I would never effing work for a company again in my life. This is such bullshit that I was fired by a fax. And I got up, and that was it. I left. And I got in my car, and I cried. I was fired, and I was young. And I cried, and then I went home, and then I wrote down 3 things that I want to do with my life. And one of that was doing advertising and some other stuff. And I found my way to my first company, which is a kiosk company. But I told myself, like, if I don't have to, I don't want to work for anybody again. Like, that was a bullshit way to get fired.
Yeah, I had a similar. When I got fired, I had told my boss, he had kind of, we were like friendly with like people, and I told him to F off in a I thought it was a polite way, and had a very similar awakening as to what it was like, and was also fired and cried on my way home too.
Yeah.
So I can relate. It's the first firing or the first whatever. Yeah. You realize you're like, and then you realize like, wow, life really went on and things worked out. So I didn't need to listen to Drops of Jupiter and just deal with it in my car, which is that's how I dealt with it.
I dealt with it through like the Smiths. How soon is now? How soon is now? That was my sad song. So
I love it. So all right. So then again, you start the kiosk company. That's kind of your first bite at the apple. And again, like it seems like again there was just like the internet was really, I guess, kind of what you saw and learned from that experience, because you were at that for what 4 plus years.
Yeah, that was pre-internet. So that was about 91 to 95, and then I started when I saw the internet in 94. I said I want to be in this thing, and then I basically like ditched that company and then moved to building this company.
Yeah, so you go there, and again, so we're at 95, right? So things are heating up, right? We're at the beginning of the beginning.
Beginning, websites are starting to be built. Yeah,
the very beginning of this, and so within 5 years, you take the company public, right? And this is in April of 2000 for everyone who's kind of listening here. So let's talk about that period, right? So let's talk about kind of that front riding, that beginning of the beginning to that, and then through the first crash. What are some like big learnings or things that you can now look back on? Because from what I understand, like, you were living out of the office space, sleeping on a couch, like you were doing whatever you could to make this thing work.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you start a company, it's by whatever means possible. Like I was sleeping on the couch in my office because I couldn't afford an office and an apartment. So I opted for like a $400 a month office. I showered at a health club, and that went on for 2 years. Then I started to make a little money building websites. I hired a small team of people, and then I invented chat, and that would be in 97, mid 97. And then went out and raised money in 99. And then it was like, boom. It was like everything was raging on the .com era. And then I went public 12 months later from getting funded. So there were 5 of us. to 12 months later, there's 180 of us and we're going public with 2 million in revenues and 20 million in losses and a $300 million market cap. And so we went public, and then it got rough quick. We were like the last internet IPO. And then the stock by 2001 traded down to 7 cents a share. The whole company's worth $2 million. And it was rough. We fired 140 out of 180 people. We, did a lot of things to stay alive, which they all kind of worked out. And in the end, we made it. So, I mean, I'm going to knock on wood. I always say this because 2001 was a very bizarre year. I was in New York City. We fired all these people. We had to restructure the company. We got hit with 9/11 and dealt with like the feeling of you could get killed, and working with employees back then. And I learned, I guess I learned there to lead through empathy. There was no textbook written about leading through, 9/11 or the .com. But I saw we had a person in the company, head of sales after 9/11 was like, we got to go. Everyone come to work. He was really got everyone in the room. We got to show them we're not going to stop working. And I remember people hated him for that. They hated this guy. And I remember afterwards I had to get rid of him. He was so hated. And I realized he wasn't listening. Yes, it was the right message. We didn't want to quit as humans, as New Yorkers, as Americans. But the same thing is people were scared of their lives. Yeah. They weren't told go to battle. These were not soldiers. These are human beings who were going to work. And I just at that point realized we got to listen. I told people if you don't want to come to work, don't come to work. It's okay. We're not going to let you go. We're not firing more people. Just take care of your safety and do what you need to do to take care of your family and your friends or whatever and yourself. And so I had we had to lead through a different skill set than you're taught in in class.
And is that and that's about when you start getting involved in more charity work as well too, right? Funding NYC that program starts about then.
Yeah, I started a program called Feeding NYC, which we fed 70 families in November in Thanksgiving, turkey dinners. And this year we'll feed 8,000 families, and we've fed close to, I think it's 70,000 families since the beginning of 20 years ago. So this is the 20th anniversary. I'm really proud of that. Once again, I felt we need to give back to people who are less fortunate during that time. I continue that. It's part of what I believe in life. So it was just an interesting time, and it ended with this culmination of giving back, and in the in-between was just a mess of survival. But it taught me you got to lead with your heart. You got to lead with your ears, not your mouth.
I love that. I think that's something that might even go that with the title for the episode. So I know we've got to run here, and again we've covered a lot, and I feel like there's a lot more. But look, if we fast forward, there's been so much, in terms of then 10 years later, you're back to Fortune's 100 fastest growing companies, 25th fastest growing tech companies. On the 2015, ring the bell at NASDAQ to celebrate 20 years in business. From making it happen. And so for everyone listening, if you think through those years of kind of coming back and where you're at right now and what you're excited about, maybe let's do those as the final two questions. So, what was it like for you? What were some of your takeaways as you then go through the financial crisis, and, to again, thriving? And, as you look forward today, what are some of the things now that, one of the most innovative companies in the world last year, you were named, what are the things that get you excited?
I really feel that our company is just starting with this thing called conversational AI, conversational commerce. That conversations will power everything. This whole office, I'll be talking. Okay, turn this off, turn that. I know, and we have this perspective of Alexa, and I think Alexa is just this command thing that we think is listening to us on Jeff Bezos' behalf. And I fundamentally believe there needs to be an AI in our life that we can trust, that we think is empathetic, that loves us, that will fulfill our most important intentions in life. Can I get my child a doctor? Let me get my kid a tutor. Let me take a trip somewhere fabulous and have people help me. But I see that being done through a conversational AI experience. And that's really what we're after. And I believe it's not a company, big tech, that's going to deliver it. It'll be a company like us that has the resources and has a vision, but also comes from a place of leading with empathy, leading with the heart. And so that's kind of my hope, because I think, unfortunately, the centralization of technology control, the centralization of anything bastardizes, business models. It makes people greedy, and that's what's happened. And I got into tech, even though I wasn't a technologist, I had to learn it, is because I thought, man, this is so creative. This is about like creativity, a community, like we're all part of this community. And somehow it ended up in a place of control and power. And we talk about these companies being like cigarette companies and oil companies. And I just think there's a shift going on right now, a massive shift going on, especially with blockchain, crypto. These companies are set up way different than our companies. And they're all about decentralization of power. Like no one created Bitcoin, if someone did create it, but there's no centralization. There's no CEO. There's no marketing department. It's a bunch of people part of a community trying to do something cool and different, and they're getting rewards for it. So there's right now, like what I feel in 1995 is what's happening now. There's a shift going on that either you're a part of it or you're going to get run over. And I think this is what makes me excited. I think we could be part of that shift.
Yeah, and I think hopefully for a lot of people listening, and maybe actually my final question is, is it these trends that get you excited, right? Again, from doing this for so long now, is it like what is it being that entrepreneur and continuing to update and to like stay ahead of the times and the trends that get you up every day?
Yeah, I mean the stuff in blockchain is just, I've gone down the rabbit hole in the last year, and if you're in tech, or even if you're young or not young, because I'm old in the tech world, like it is a young world. There is people there, and not just young people age-wise, but young, it reminds me of 1995. It's like trying to change the world for the goodness of it, but they created structures and models that will hopefully cure some of the things we are feeling in the world we live today. It's the centralization of power. And I just think that's exciting. So yeah, I keep connected to things. I have a vision of the future. I have to live in the future, and then I get the exciting part of working with a group of people to manifest that future. And that's a privilege. Like God gave us all this body and this mind and this energy to create things. And I think it's a privilege to be able to create things with a group of people and bring those things to reality, things that are in your head, and then they become manifested, for real, and they change the world. And I don't feel like I've done my part yet. Yeah, I invented this technology. I invented web chat, and billions of people have used it. But I feel like I've got something in me that was a building block to something quite bigger. This is what I feel. This is why I wake up every day and go to work.
I can hear it. All right. I think it's that next chapter that sometimes you don't know what's going to prep you for it, but it sounds like everything you've done is leading up to where we're headed. So Rob, I appreciate it, man. This is a really fun conversation. I think we'll definitely have to have you on for a part 2 down in a few months, just to kind of talk through some of those middle years. But hopefully everyone learning again, the concept of how you lead with empathy, how you lead your team, and how you think about building a company today, and especially with what's coming. And, with the great resignation and these other things, I think it's just more important now than ever. So it's a great message, Rob, and really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Jake. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we will see you on another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.